By now, and voters are considering core issues that impact their lives ahead of polling day. One of the most important issues is housing affordability. Many young people fear they will never be able to buy a home in this country, believing the great Australian dream of home ownership is now out of reach. Joining me live now is Property Council Chief Executive Ken Morrison. Ken, say it isn't so.
Great to talk to you, Laura.
So, is it out of reach?
I'm afraid it is so. We knew that these results would be poor when we decided to put a spotlight on how difficult people thought it was to get in the housing market. But I didn't expect the results to be this dire. So fully 70% of young people think they'll never be able to break into the market. Interestingly, when you look at over 55s, that sentiment's shared. About 70% of people think that the dream's slipping away for young people. And very interestingly, this is now seen as an issue which they're looking to our federal politicians on. So about half of 18 to 25-year-olds say this will be an important issue in how they vote in May, and a quarter of that cohort feel that this will be a very important issue as to how they vote. So I think what we've got here is a national level crisis that needs a national response, and that's what we're calling for from the federal political parties.
What's that national response look like? What's the perfect solution here?
Well, I think we need to do a few different things. So we need to get supply right. And last week we had a parliamentary review chaired by Liberal MP Jason Falinski that put a couple of models on the table, which borrowed from things that federal governments have done in the past. So put incentives on the table to get the housing supply right that we need in our growing cities. The federal government's own forecasts show that housing supply is set to drop by about 35% just at the time that our population growth is going to restart. So that is not where we want to be, growing population and housing supply going backwards. So getting the levers in place to fix that with the states and territories. The government's got some very good home deposit schemes which should continue, which help people bridge that deposit gap. Labor is today talking about extending those for regional Australians, so that's very sensible work. And the third plank would be to get the right incentives so we can get more investment into affordable housing in this country, because unfortunately there's a growing need for that as well. Yeah,
it does take the states, territories and the federal government working together, and even the local councils in many ways. We've seen National Cabinet does work when it needs to, but what about on this issue? Any light?
Well, I think that's where it needs to end up. We can't have this acute problem, which is clearly a big social issue. It's clearly a big issue for families, but it's also an economic issue. If our cities, not just our big cities, but if many of our regional cities are also too expensive for a lot of people to live in, or people can't afford to live close to their work, that's just not where we want to be. So this is something that's got a lot worse. We know there's a lot of community concern here. So this issue needs to be elevated. And we do know that there are ways for federal government to take leadership, which is not rewriting the Constitution. It's not, assuming land use control for the whole of Australia, but it is collaborating with the states, using a bit of their financial muscle to get the deals done, get the outcomes done, so we get better housing supply outcomes on the ground, but also some of those other things that I mentioned earlier.
Well, Ken, let's hope there's something in the budget. We'll talk to you next week when we see it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.